Caroline browsed the store aisles, looking for the perfect gift for Cole. She picked out 2 pairs of fun slippers, each with silly faces and bright colours. She walked up to the cashier with a hopeful smile and asked, "Do you think my man will like these?" The cashier laughed and nodded. "Definitely. They're unique and show you care. Plus, these are the last ones left. They've been really popular," he explained. "They're super soft and comfy. That's probably why," Caroline responded, laughing along. Feeling confident in her choice, Caroline headed home, excited to give Cole the slippers. She got off work early today since a meeting was cancelled, giving her the perfect chance to surprise him. But when she got home, Caroline was shocked to find unfamiliar women's boots in the hallway and heard strange noises from the bedroom. Her heart sank as she peeked inside and saw Cole with another woman. Fighting back tears, Caroline refused to let them see her upset. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, and headed to a nearby cafe as a blizzard began to pick up. At the cafe, Caroline realised she had left her bag behind. She had just enough cash for a coffee. No money, no Cole, she thought, trying to stay strong. Thankfully, she still had her phone. After warming up, the cafe staff told her they were closing. Caroline dreaded the thought of going back home. She remembered she had her office keys and decided to go there instead. "Who's there?" the night security guard called out. Recognizing her, he asked why she was there so late. Caroline, shivering and upset, asked if she could stay the night in her office. The guard, known affectionately as Uncle Mike, was a familiar, kind face in her workplace. "Of course, Caroline," he said quickly, showing genuine concern. "I can't leave you out in the cold like this. Come in, I'll get you some coffee. You're shaking. We don't want you getting sick." Caroline stepped into her office, took off her thick jacket, and wrapped her hands around the warm cup of coffee the security guard had kindly made for her. Working here meant a lot to Caroline. Cole, her partner, co-owned the publishing house, but she never knew who the other owner was. Cole always avoided that subject. Caroline, with her background in journalism, had joined the team and quickly became a key player, often covering for Cole and taking on extra duties. She was deeply committed to supporting him, considering him not just a partner but family. But now, sitting alone in her office, reality hit her hard. "So this is it, Caroline. It's all over. The man you thought was your everything turned out to be nothing but a cheater," she said to herself, trying to laugh it off, but the hurt was too deep. The betrayal replayed in her mind, over and over. She locked herself in and finally let the tears flow, spending most of the night crying, only managing to fall asleep in the early hours, slumped in her office chair. The next thing she knew, there was a commotion outside. Someone was banging on the door furiously. "Caroline, open up! Let me in!" It was Cole, yelling from the other side. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't want to face him, but she knew she couldn't avoid it forever. Reluctantly, Caroline opened the door but turned away, facing the window instead, not ready to look him in the eye. "Why didn't you come home last night?" Cole asked, his tone pressing for an answer. Caroline kept her gaze fixed on the window, not wanting to let Cole see any vulnerability. "I'm not giving him the satisfaction of seeing me upset," she thought, steeling herself. Gathering her courage, she turned to face him, her expression composed. "I did come home early, but it looked like you were busy," she said, her words laced with a clear hint of the betrayal she'd witnessed. Cole caught her implication instantly. He tried to hold her gaze, his face betraying no regret. Instead, he had the audacity to smirk and say, "Look, I have needs. I can't just sit around waiting for you. You're always busy, tired or something." What do you expect me to do?" His tone was challenging, as if trying to shift the blame onto her. "So, you're saying it's my fault you cheated?" Caroline's voice trembled with disbelief and anger. She had anticipated many reactions, but his blatant attempt to turn the tables was too much. She moved to leave, but Cole blocked her path, pinning her against the wall with a force that took her breath away. "Where do you think you're going? You think I'd just let you walk away?" he said, his voice laced with arrogance. "Let me go, Cole. We're done. I can't do this anymore," Caroline protested, trying to push him away, but he wouldn't budge. Cole's voice took on a darker tone. "Think about what you're doing. You're nothing without me. Remember where I found you? You think anyone else in this town would give you a chance without my say-so?" His words were meant to intimidate, to remind her of her supposed dependency on him. Carolina fought to keep her emotions in check, but it was a losing battle. With no family left, Coley had been her everything. Losing her parents early, and then her grandmother, who had been her rock, had been tough enough. Cole knew the depth of these losses and how vulnerable they made her, yet he chose this moment to strike a blow. "I can't believe I never saw your true colours until now," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. As she felt his grip slacken, she seized the moment to pull away and started running, her tears breaking free as she did. She felt an overwhelming emptiness, a void that seemed to swallow her whole. Once she had put some distance between herself and the publishing house, she stopped, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and hurt. Her life, as she knew it, was irrevocably changed. She knew she had to leave the apartment she shared with Cole, but the thought of going back, even just to collect her things, filled her with dread. How could he do this to me? She kept asking herself, the betrayal echoing in her mind. Wiping her tears, she wandered aimlessly along the streets, past the shop windows and cafes, trying to gather her thoughts. As she walked, Caroline began to question everything about her relationship with Cole. How had she not seen the signs? Why had the man she envisioned a future with treated her with such disregard? He hadn't even attempted to explain himself, let alone apologize. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she had been convenient for Cole, nothing more. This harsh truth hit her hard, bringing a fresh wave of tears. Now it all made sense to her why Cole was often leaving work early and getting home late. She had been bending over backward trying to help Cole with his workload and support him, only to find out he was messing around with other women. Then he'd casually come back home and lie in the same bed with her, as if everything was normal. Caroline was wandering without a clear direction. As she walked past a flower shop, she paused to watch a man picking out flowers. Catching a glimpse of herself in the shop window, Caroline managed a weak smile. She saw a reflection of a girl with puffy red eyes from crying, her mascara running down her face. Turning away from her reflection, she bowed her head and continued walking, lost in her own gloomy thoughts and barely aware of the world around her. Just then, a man came out of the flower shop carrying a big basket of white roses. Distracted, Caroline bumped into him. The flowers went flying, and she ended up on the ground. "Watch where you're going," the man said, sounding annoyed but still reaching out to help her up. The moment he touched her hand, Caroline experienced something she had spent her entire life trying to forget. Her chest felt tight, her head was spinning, and it was as if a fire had been lit inside her. She couldn't get up. Her body felt limp, her limbs wouldn't cooperate. Visions flashed before her eyes. She saw the man beside her engulfed in flames, trapped in a burning car. The flames were all around him. His screams of pain were deafening. Caroline felt every ounce of his agony as if it were her own. She passed out. When Caroline regained consciousness, the first thing she saw was the concerned face of the man from her vision. "My God, you really frightened me there. We should call an ambulance," he said, clearly shaken. "No need for an ambulance, thank you. I'll be all right in a bit," Caroline reassured him, despite his evident worry. After all, he had just seen her having a convulsion. "Did you hit your head? You should probably see a doctor," the stranger suggested with concern. "I'm okay, really," Caroline reassured him as they made their way to a nearby bench at the bus stop. The man seemed unsure, but eventually walked towards a parked black car, checking the license plate. "Wait!" Caroline called out, rushing towards him. The man paused, surprised to see her running his way. Catching his hand, Caroline urged, "I know this sounds crazy, but you have to trust me. Please don't use this car tomorrow. I'm begging you. Your life could be at risk." The man gave her a bewildered smile. "You seem stressed out. Can I drive you home?" Caroline shook her head no. "Just promise me you'll stay home tomorrow. Please, it's for your own good," she whispered earnestly. He looked at her, puzzled, then got into his car and drove away. Caroline let out a deep sigh. He hadn't taken her warning seriously. She couldn't blame him. She would have doubted herself too if she wasn't aware of her own unique gift. With a heavy heart, she made her way towards Coley's house to collect her belongings. As she neared the house where she had spent so many years, her heart sank further. The thought of encountering Cole, or even worse, his mistress, was daunting. When she tried her key in the lock, it wouldn't turn. In disbelief, she realized Cole had changed the locks. Overwhelmed, she sat on the doorstep, tears streaming down her face. She lingered there until late, but Cole never appeared. Remembering the trailer she owned, where she had let a young family stay for minimal rent, Caroline contemplated her next steps. She had always felt secure with her job and living situation, but now everything was uncertain. Reluctantly, she called the tenants to inquire about their well-being. Learning they were expecting a baby soon, Caroline couldn't bring herself to ask them to leave. Instead, she feigned a casual check-in, assuring them everything was fine on her end, unable to voice her own need. Caroline was at a loss for what to do next. Her only fallback was her grandmother's old house in a village outside the city, which was already run down back when her grandmother was alive. Her grandmother had scrimped and saved with the dream of buying Caroline an apartment in the city, but in the end, all she could afford was a mobile home in a trailer park. It had been years since Caroline last visited the village, not since her grandmother's funeral. After mulling it over, she decided to head to work. Uncle Mike was on shift again, and she was sure he wouldn't turn her away. When she got to the publishing house, she felt utterly drained. She knocked, and the door creaked open. Uncle Mike looked at her with a mix of apology and sorrow. "Caroline, I'm really sorry, but I've been told not to let you in anymore," he confessed. "Is this Cole's doing?" Caroline's voice shook as she spoke. "Yes, he's been in a rage since you left, taking it out on everyone. He ordered us to replace you immediately," Uncle Mike explained with a heavy heart. "I don't know what went down between you two, but I can't let you into the office. You can crash in my storage room for tonight and figure things out in the morning." "Thank you, Uncle Mike," Caroline managed to say through her tears. Caroline understood Cole's frustration. Replacing her wouldn't be easy since she had the workload of 3 people. Now, she felt even more used. realizing Cole had kept her around not just for her work ethic, but also because she could cook and clean. Despite the throbbing pain in her head and the ache in her heart, Caroline fell asleep as soon as her head hit the pillow. She was awakened the next morning by the sunlight and distant voices. She quickly got ready and headed to her office, surprised to find it unlocked. She rushed to collect her belongings, her laptop being the most crucial item. As she was stuffing her things into her bag, Cole stormed in. "What are you doing here? Who let you in? You're fired," he snapped. "I'm just here to collect my things and square away any outstanding business. I won't trouble you any further," Caroline responded calmly. The man standing in front of her now was hardly the Cole she once knew and loved. "Leave and put everything back," Cole bellowed, his voice echoing through the office. Heads turned as curious colleagues began to peer into the room, though Cole seemed unfazed by the attention. "These are my personal items, and the laptop is mine as well. Don't lose your head over this, Cole," Caroline countered, gripping her bag tightly. Just as Cole, fueled by rage, raised his hand as if to strike her, the secretary intervened. "Cole Vladimirovich, your visitors are here," she announced, effectively halting his aggressive gesture. "You're lucky this time. Now leave," he shouted at Caroline. "I can't understand why you're behaving like this. Perhaps this is the cost of my loyalty and love for you. But remember, what goes around comes around. The harm you've done will not go unnoticed." As he gently laid her down, he paused, Caroline declared boldly, before rushing out of the office, tears streaming down her face. Meanwhile, Andrew and his friend Josh were having a conversation in the comfort of plush leather chairs. "I'm just fed up with all of it. It feels like I'm drowning in despair," Andrew confessed. "Hey, don't overdo it. You've got it all. A solid business, steady income, and your pick of the ladies. Hannah, for instance, is a knockout." Josh tried to cheer him up, offering a reassuring smile. "You might be right, but none of that has made me happy for a long time. I'm yearning for something real, something genuine. But all these women, Hannah included, seem only interested in my bank account," Andrew reflected, his gaze drifting to the window. Standing up, Andrew walked over to the expansive office window, pondering his situation. His success and wealth had always attracted women, but what he truly desired was a connection that went beyond the superficial. His business empire, which spanned publishing houses and television channels, demanded a persona that was tough and unyielding, often forcing him to conceal his more romantic, sensitive side. Andrew found himself reminiscing about an unusual encounter earlier that day while picking up flowers for Hannah. "Met this odd girl today," he shared, his gaze lost in the view outside. "She had this urgent message for me. Told me not to get in my car tomorrow, claimed it was dangerous." Josh chuckled at the story. "You're not getting superstitious on me, are you? We've got a big meeting to focus on." "Yeah, I've got it." Andrew brushed the conversation aside, his mind still on the girl's warning. After parting ways with Josh, Andrew headed home. Hannah was there to greet him, all sweetness and affection, draping herself around him. "Missed you like crazy today," she cooed, peppering him with kisses. "Hannah, please, I'm wiped," Andrew said, gently extricating himself from her embrace. "You can be such a drag, Andrew. Why did I even bother with you?" Hannah retorted, her mood flipping. "Did you, though? Really fall for me?" Andrew questioned, looking for something genuine in her eyes. Hannah's temper flared at the question, and she didn't wait for an answer before launching into complaints about his constant tiredness. Andrew, feeling the weight of the day, retreated to his room, leaving Hannah with a parting shot, "I'm not keeping anyone here against their will." Behind closed doors, Hannah vented to her father, while Andrew lay on his bed, lost in thought. He remembered his childhood, a time he now considered the happiest of his life, spent in a quiet town with his mother, away from the city's chaos. His father, James, had left them behind to chase opportunities in Los Angeles and never came back, leaving a deep scar on both Andrew and his mother. Unexpectedly, after Andrew finished school, James reappeared, offering him a chance to move to the city for college and promising a bright future. It turned out James's other ventures hadn't panned out, and he was reaching out to Andrew, his forgotten son. Despite his resentment towards James and reluctance to leave his mother, Andrew was persuaded by her to take the opportunity. This decision would eventually lead Andrew down a path to where he was now, reflecting on his life's complexities and the genuine connections he yearned for. After getting his degree, Andrew quickly joined his dad's business. But it wasn't long before he struck out on his own, building a successful company from the ground up. It was his dad who introduced him to Hannah, a prosecutor's daughter. Her family had connections, even if they weren't rolling in money. Dad kept going on about how great Hannah was, saying her dad's connections would be a big deal for us, Andrew recalled. At first, things with Hannah seemed okay, but over time, Andrew felt more like a wallet than a partner. His buddies couldn't stop talking about how stunning Hannah was, but that didn't do much for him. Lately, she'd been dropping not-so-subtle hints about making things official, and both their families were on their case about it. Andrew had been dragging his feet on popping the question, and lately, he'd been thinking more about calling it quits. Then, he thought back to the girl he'd bumped into that morning. Her words were stuck in his head. She was just an average girl, but she was so adamant he shouldn't get in his car today. What was that all about? Picking up his phone, Andrew rang Josh. "Hey man, I'm going to head over to see my mum. Can you cover for me at the meeting tomorrow?" Hearing about the trip, Hannah's face fell. "I thought we were going out tonight. Did you forget?" "This nowhere you're talking about is where I grew up. It means a lot to me. Plus, my mom's there," Andrew shot back. "Why don't you take me with you? I could meet your mum, you know, with the wedding coming up and all," Hannah tried, laying it on thick. "I think it's best if you don't. Go out with your friends. I need some space," Andrew said, turning to call a cab. He knew his mum wouldn't take to Hannah. His mum could spot a mile away when things weren't right. She'd always told him love was what made a marriage. Hannah tried a bit more to get her way, but when Andrew didn't budge, she gave up and started getting ready for her night out. Andrew tossed and turned, his mind a maze of worries, feeling like his life was teetering on the edge. Sure, money wasn't a problem, but deep down, he craved genuine love and companionship. He once opened up to his dad about it, but James just brushed it off. "Son, don't be naive. In our circles, it's all about smart choices, not foolish sentiments," his dad had scoffed. "What about you and Mom? Wasn't there love?" Andrew had asked, confused. "Love? That fizzled out with the daily grind," James had countered. "But you were the one who walked away for a better deal," Andrew couldn't help but point out. "And look where it got us. If I hadn't, we'd still be stuck in that dead-end town. Now, you're living the high life because of my choices," his dad had argued, pacing the room with an air of self-righteousness. "Don't tell me you're regretting it now. Only a weakling would think like that." Andrew bit his tongue to avoid lashing out, not wanting to seem weak in his father's eyes. He had always strived to prove he could make it on his own, working tirelessly to build his business without relying on his dad. The conversation haunted Andrew, especially on restless nights like this. He finally drifted off just before dawn, but it felt like moments later when his alarm blared. On his way to see his mum, Andrew made a pit stop at one of his offices. The moment he walked in, he could hear the editor-in-chief, Cole, causing a scene. "What's the trouble?" Andrew inquired, catching the secretary's eye. The secretary glanced around nervously, then whispered, "Andrew Sergeyevich, Cole's fired Caroline, and he's piling her work on anyone he thinks can handle more. Caroline was key around here. She handled so much." Andrew nodded, storing this information for a confrontation with Cole. When Cole showed up, Andrew studied him, ready to address the issue. "Cole, you're running the editorial team, but it seems like things are a mess. I'm hearing complaints," Andrew started. Cole was defiant. "These rumours, they're either from our rivals or from sore losers we've let go. Everything's under control here," he insisted, facing off with Andrew. "I've been looking over your reports, and I've noticed a lot of people leaving lately. What's up with that?" Andrew pressed Cole, his patience wearing thin with the man seated across from him. "I believe in making quick decisions. If someone doesn't fit, I find someone who does," Cole responded, with a bit too much ease for Andrew's liking. "Got it. We're done here." Andrew dismissed him, noting Cole's stiff departure. Something didn't sit right, so after a few calls to the main office, Andrew set up an audit for the publishing house. He also made a point to check on Caroline's situation with HR. The publishing house, a new addition to his media empire, was actually Hannah's suggestion, given her fondness for their magazines. Andrew saw potential there, but hadn't anticipated this kind of trouble. Opting to skip the meeting, Andrew jumped into his truck and headed for his mum's place, leaving Josh to handle things. He even told his driver to take the day off, looking forward to some peace and quiet. The thought of seeing his mum again brought a genuine smile to his face. He turned his phone off, ready for a break from it all. Visits to his mum had become rare due to his packed schedule. Standing outside her cosy house, memories flooded back. Despite his offers to upgrade her living situation, his mum had always preferred her independence. The fresh air and the familiarity of home brought a sense of calm. His mum, Olivia, was surprised but thrilled to see him. "Is everything okay?" she asked as he dug into her home-cooked meal. "Yeah, all good. Just needed a break from the city. Missed you," he replied, managing a smile that took years off his face. Olivia, sensing his unrest, chose not to probe further. That night, Andrew experienced a peace he hadn't felt in ages, sleeping deeply into the next day. When he finally turned his phone back on, it was as if he'd been gone for ages, with a barrage of messages waiting, particularly urgent ones from Josh and Hannah. Just then, Andrew's phone buzzed with urgency. "Where have you been, man? Had us all worried sick," Josh's voice crackled with concern. "What's going on?" Andrew was taken aback. He learned that after getting Andrew's message, his driver, assuming Andrew was out of town, parked the car at Andrew's place and left. But shockingly, an hour later, the car blew up. Hearing this, Andrew felt his knees give way, and the phone slipped from his grasp, Josh's voice fading into the background. His heart raced with the chilling realization that he had narrowly escaped death. Josh was still talking when Andrew gathered himself and picked up the phone. "We got really lucky," Josh was saying. Rushing to leave, Andrew was met with his mother's saddened eyes. "You're leaving so soon?" she asked, her voice laced with disappointment. "I have to, Mom. I'll come back. I promise," Andrew assured her, giving her a quick kiss before dashing out to a waiting taxi. 3 days later, The investigation confirmed it. The explosion was due to a bomb set to go off later. Meanwhile, Caroline was dealing with her own set of problems. Her paycheck was much smaller than expected, hardly reflecting the effort and hours she poured into her job. Despite the shared living situation with Cole, she never broached the topic of a raise, wary of how it might look to others. She felt undervalued, her contributions to the business seemingly invisible. The long, cold bus ride only added to her sense of isolation, each minute stretching on as she braced against the biting wind, a long walk still ahead of her. Wrapped up tightly in her scarf, Caroline pushed forward along the dimly lit path, the lights of the village finally coming into view, offering a small comfort after her exhausting journey. The house, with its weathered appearance, stood unoccupied, its charm hidden beneath layers of neglect. She retrieved the key from its usual hiding spot, a small tradition between her and her grandmother, and stepped inside the chilly, musty interior. The broken window and sparse woodpile promised a few challenging days ahead, but Caroline was determined to make do. She managed to get the stove going and patched up the window with a piece of linoleum, improvising to keep the cold at bay. As the stove's warmth began to seep through the room, Caroline allowed herself a moment's rest and drifted off to sleep. The sharp sting of pain in her arms jolted Caroline awake, her skin a worrying shade of purple signaling frostbite. Frantically, she added more wood to the stove, trying to increase the warmth. As she settled into her grandmother's old chair, memories flooded back, mingling with tears for the lost connection. The situation quickly turned dire as Caroline's hands grew increasingly painful, her throat sore, and a fever set in by evening. With no proper medicine, only herbal tea and some jam to rely on, her condition deteriorated overnight. Weak and delirious with fever, she was haunted by memories of her grandmother and their shared moments of joy. Caroline's tragic past, losing her parents in a winter accident, echoed the present's bleakness. Her grandmother's gift, a burden of foresight without the power to alter fate, had always been a point of contention and fear within the family, leaving Caroline to navigate her grief and inherited legacy alone. After losing her parents, Caroline and her grandmother moved into a small trailer in the city, provided by her grandmother's efforts. Caroline was very close to her grandmother and tried to support her in every way. During her teenage years, Caroline discovered that she, too, had inherited her grandmother's unique gift, which led to rare but deeply unsettling visions. Now, weakened by fever and illness, Caroline struggled to get out of bed when she heard a knock at the door. Hoping for some assistance, she gathered her remaining strength and made her way to the door, only to collapse as she opened it. Andrew, who was at the door, caught her just in time and took her back to bed. Seeing her pale and in a dire state, he knew she needed medical attention immediately. He wrapped her in a blanket, placed her in his car, and drove to the hospital, all the while getting advice from a doctor friend on the phone. Upon reaching the hospital, Andrew carried Caroline into the emergency room, where the staff took over and assured him they would update him on her condition. The whole way home, Andrew couldn't stop thinking about her. When Caroline regained consciousness, she found herself in a hospital room that looked like something out of a movie, with her hands bandaged and an IV in her arm. A nurse came in, saw her awake, and went to call the doctor. The doctor informed Caroline that they had managed to stabilize her condition and treat her pneumonia, but she would need to stay in the hospital for further observation and recovery. After the doctor left, the nurse, while changing Caroline's IV, commented on how her husband had been so caring and attentive, which confused Caroline. She couldn't imagine Cole, her actual partner, being the one who had brought her in, given their strained relationship. So, who was it then? The next few days were more of the same. Routine medical procedures, injections, and medications. The only break in the monotony came from a young nurse who occasionally brought in treats, claiming they were from her husband and always speaking highly of him. During one of these days, Caroline was half asleep when Andrew walked into her room. In just 2 days, she seemed to have changed. Her cheeks had a healthy glow and her breathing was steady and relaxed. Andrew had found out from the doctor about Caroline's serious hand injuries, which would need extensive treatment. He had spent these days getting to know more about her by reviewing her medical case and consulting with colleagues. He felt an urge to hold her hand, but hesitated, not wanting to frighten her. Caroline, feeling someone in the room, slowly opened her eyes. "Is that you?" she murmured. "Hey, I'm Andrew. We didn't really get to introduce ourselves last time," he said with a friendly smile. "I hope I didn't say anything inappropriate back then." "Actually, I'm the one who should be sorry. I was rambling. Probably scared you. You must have thought I was out of my mind," Caroline responded. At that moment, I was a bit taken aback. But let's just say we're even. You played a part in saving my life. I was skeptical about such things, but then my car was sabotaged yesterday. Caroline stayed quiet, feeling a wave of emotions. Andrew's touch brought back a flood of memories, reminiscent of the sensations she felt when she first discovered her abilities as a child. She remembered the fear, the confusion, and how her grandmother had comforted her. Feeling overwhelmed, she gently lay back down. "You should rest for now. Don't stress," Andrew said gently. "Would you like me to read something to you?" he offered unexpectedly. Caroline nodded. Andrew settled himself at the edge of the bed, pulled out a book, and started to read. Caroline wasn't really listening to the words. It was his soothing voice that captivated her. She stayed quiet, stealing glances at him. Today, he looked different from their first encounter. Gone was the formal suit and coat, replaced by casual blue jeans and a simple sweater. His dark hair was styled neatly, and he was clean-shaven. The faint scent of his cologne was subtle yet comforting. Andrew's visits became a daily occurrence. Initially, their conversations were short and somewhat stiff. However, as time passed, they began to chat more freely, like longtime friends. They discovered shared interests, similar life perspectives, a compatible sense of humour, and the fact that they worked in the same field, which helped them connect on a deeper level. The following day, Andrew didn't show up, but the doctor did. "Good morning, Caroline." She heard the doctor's cheerful greeting. "You're set to go home tomorrow." The doctor jotted down some instructions and mentioned she'd hand over the remaining discharge paperwork the next day before leaving. Caroline was unexpectedly disheartened by the news of her discharge. The idea of going back home, especially with her hand still healing, filled her with dread. She was concerned about how she would manage everyday tasks and knew that continuing her therapy at the clinic the doctor mentioned was financially impossible. According to what Caroline had gathered from the nurse, Andrew had been covering her current treatment expenses. On the morning of her discharge, Caroline packed her things and made her way to the exit. That's when she heard a familiar voice call out, "Caroline, thank goodness, I made it in time." It was Andrew, standing there with a bouquet of flowers. "I'm sorry I missed yesterday. I got caught up in some urgent work. Can we sit down? I need to talk to you about something important." He suggested they head to a nearby cafe to chat. Once settled, Andrew seemed hesitant to start the conversation, betraying a hint of nervousness. "I've been talking to your doctor," Andrew finally started. "He says you need more treatment, and it's pretty serious. Going back to your place in the countryside might not be the best idea right now. It's not really fit for living." He paused for a moment. "I do have a place in the city, but I've promised my tenants some more time," Caroline responded quietly. "I know about your housing situation and that you lost your job because of coal," Andrew said, his voice laced with concern. "I want to offer you a business opportunity," he declared. "I'd like you to come work for me, and about a place to stay, we'll work something out. You could even stay at my place for the time being," he suggested, giving her a questioning look. Caroline was puzzled. "What exactly do you have in mind for me to do?" she asked, her thoughts swirling. "Caroline, you're highly skilled in your field. I have an exciting project in mind, but I need someone with your expertise, someone I can trust. I believe you're the right person for this," Andrew assured her, gently placing his hand over hers. "My place is spacious. You'll have your own room and office. Plus, we'll make sure you get all the treatments you need to recover quickly," he said, meeting her gaze. "Please consider it. This could be a great solution for you." "I'm not sure," Caroline said, her gaze locked with Andrew's piercing blue eyes, feeling a whirlwind of emotions she couldn't quite understand. Andrew didn't pressure her for an immediate answer, giving her space to think. Yet, he couldn't hide his hope that she would accept his offer. "Caroline, I can't put into words how much you mean to me. You saved my life. Please let me help you in return," Andrew pleaded earnestly, his eyes reflecting genuine emotion. As they walked towards Andrew's car, they shared light-hearted conversations and laughter. However, as they approached their destination, Andrew's demeanor shifted to a more serious tone. He parked the car at the entrance of a grand estate and turned to Caroline with a serious expression. "There's something I need to tell you before we go in," Andrew hesitated. "Hannah, my girlfriend, also lives here." Caroline felt a jolt of surprise at his words, like a splash of cold water. "Are you sure she's okay with this arrangement?" Caroline inquired, trying to mask her disappointment. "Don't worry about it. Hannah isn't involved in our work, and she's rarely around," Andrew assured her. The rest of the drive was quiet, with Caroline lost in her thoughts, gazing out the window. She had half expected Andrew to be single, but reality had proved otherwise. Upon arriving, Caroline was taken aback by the house's size, yet found it surprisingly welcoming. It was nothing like the cold museum-like mansions she had imagined. They were met by a small staff consisting of a cook, a maid, and an elderly manager, all of whom were warm and welcoming. Settling into her room, Caroline was struck by its spaciousness and tasteful decor, complete with a private bathroom and a balcony. There was even an adjoining office, fully equipped for her work. Surveying the room and her few possessions, Caroline realized she needed to collect her things from Cole's place. The thought of facing Cole again was daunting, and she wasn't quite sure how to approach the situation. When Carolina heard a knock on her door that evening, she jumped a bit, not expecting any visitors. It was Victor, the house manager, inviting her to join them for dinner in the dining room. Slipping into her slippers, Caroline followed Victor without hesitation, her stomach reminding her she hadn't eaten in a while. Andrew greeted her with a warm smile as she entered the dining room, motioning for her to take the seat across from him. "I owe you an apology," he said. "For what?" Caroline asked, curious. "For almost letting you go hungry," he replied with a grin. Caroline chuckled. "That's all right. I guess a fasting day every now and then isn't too bad." You don't need to fast, Andrew teased, giving her a playful look. Their light-hearted banter was interrupted by a female voice. Hannah, making her way down the stairs to the dining table, changed the atmosphere instantly. She walked up to Andrew, gave him a kiss, and then turned her attention to Caroline with a provocative tone. "Bringing your work home now? Or is she someone special?" Hannah challenged. Andrew introduced Caroline as his personal assistant, staying under special circumstances, but Caroline could barely focus, feeling a sense of déjà vu upon seeing Hannah's bright red hair. Feeling uncomfortable with the situation, Caroline excused herself, claiming she wasn't feeling well, and retreated to her room, missing Hannah's mocking comments about her appearance. Alone and feeling trapped by her circumstances, Caroline's thoughts were a whirlwind. Despite the late hour and her earlier discomfort, hunger eventually drove her to seek out the kitchen for something to drink. The house was quiet, and the dim lighting suggested everyone had retired for the night. In the kitchen, Caroline made herself a cup of coffee and then wandered into the living room, drawn by the grandeur of the fireplace and the mesmerizing view outside. Caroline was so lost in her thoughts, she hardly noticed Andrew's approach until his voice gently broke the silence. "Hope I'm not bothering you?" he asked, standing nearby in a robe, his hair slightly damp from a shower. It was a more casual look than Caroline was used to seeing on him. He joined her on the windowsill with his own drink in hand. "I find it hard to sleep sometimes too," he shared. "I like the quiet moments at night, enjoying a cup of coffee, just thinking, dreaming." "I get that," Caroline responded with a soft sigh. "I love nights like this too. The stars, the calm. It makes me want to explore, to create." Andrew smiled at her words, but his mind was preoccupied with a question he couldn't shake off. "How did you know I was in danger?" he finally asked, cutting straight to the point. Caroline hesitated, worried her explanation might sound bizarre. She rarely discussed her unusual intuition because it often wasn't taken seriously. "It's something I inherited, maybe from my grandmother. She had a sort of foresight, and I guess it's come to me. It's not something I fully understand, and it doesn't happen often," she explained as best she could. "Thank you," Andrew said softly after a moment, his gaze fixed on her, both of them wrapped in a thoughtful silence. Eventually, Caroline broke the quiet. "I suppose we should try to get some sleep, huh?" "Yeah, it's been a long day. Good night, Caroline," Andrew replied, remaining in the living room as Caroline headed to bed. The next morning, Caroline awoke at dawn, feeling a slight improvement in her arms. Looking out the window, she saw Andrew, now in his business attire, heading to his car. When he sensed her watching, he looked up, prompting a shy smile and wave from Caroline, which he returned before driving off. Determined to get a start on her new responsibilities, Caroline first planned to freshen up and grab breakfast. Descending the stairs, she encountered Hannah at the dining table and hesitated upon noticing her presence. "Oh, look who it is," Hannah began with a tone that was far from welcoming. "This area is for the homeowners. You're here on a temporary work basis, so you should eat with the other staff. No need to disturb the peace here," she said dismissively. Caroline remained composed in the face of Hannah's outburst, her mind preoccupied with trying to place where she had seen Hannah before, rather than reacting to her sharp words. "I'm sorry," Caroline said quietly, choosing to withdraw to the kitchen where the cook kindly prepared her some coffee and sandwiches. She took her breakfast back to her room, deciding it was the best place to eat and reflect. The encounter with Andrew's fiancée was unsettling, but diving into her work helped Caroline push those feelings aside. She spent the entire day in her room, focused on her tasks, only pausing when the daylight began to fade. Glancing out the window, she noticed Andrew and Hannah leaving together, dressed elegantly for an evening out. They seemed like an ideal pair from a distance, and Caroline found herself watching them until they disappeared from view. The following morning, Caroline made an effort to look her best, applying light makeup and styling her hair, before heading to the kitchen for a quick breakfast. She had a doctor's appointment to attend to that day. Meanwhile, Andrew came down to the living room to find Hannah already seated at the breakfast table, which was unusual for them. Nursing a throbbing headache from the less than enjoyable evening before, he was taken aback by her presence. Seeing her there, Andrew couldn't help but ask, "What's the occasion for this early gathering?" Hannah's response was laced with an intention to mend their strained relationship. "I thought it's about time we start spending more quality time together, especially with the wedding coming up. It's important, don't you think?" she said, hinting at a future where such shared moments would become routine. Andrew could only respond with a deep sigh as he took a sip of his coffee, the weight of their current situation settling heavily on him. Andrew, noticing Caroline's absence at breakfast, questioned, "Shouldn't Caroline be joining us for breakfast? It's quite late." Hannah responded with a hint of irritation. "Do we really need staff joining us at the table?" Andrew corrected her firmly. "Caroline isn't staff. She's an important guest, and I expect her to be treated as such." Hannah couldn't hide her disdain any longer. "And I'm supposed to just accept her around all the time? Did you see those pajamas she wore to dinner? Who does that in someone else's home? I told her she should eat in the kitchen with the other staff, not here." That was the last straw for Andrew. Slamming his hand on the table, he declared, "In my house, I decide who eats at my table. If you have a problem with someone's presence, you're welcome to eat elsewhere." With that, Andrew headed to the kitchen and found Caroline laughing and chatting with the maid, looking quite at ease. He noticed her change in attire. She was dressed in sleek trousers and a blouse that highlighted her figure, her makeup enhancing her features. "Caroline, I'll be driving you to the clinic today," he announced. Taken aback, Caroline quickly got up to join him. Hannah, left alone at the breakfast table, watched with a mix of surprise and jealousy as Caroline walked out with Andrew. Andrew gave Caroline a compliment as they settled into the car, saying, "You look great today." Caroline just smiled in response, appreciating the gesture. After their visit to the clinic, Andrew mentioned he had something he wanted to show her. They pulled up to a sleek, modern office building. "What do you think of this place? Impressive, isn't it?" Andrew asked with a smile. Caroline was intrigued but confused. "It's certainly impressive, but I'm not sure what you're getting at." Andrew shared his aspirations. "This is part of a new venture I'm working on. I've had a lot of help from my dad in the past, and while I'm thankful, I want to prove I can make it on my own. I'm planning to start my own media project, including TV channels, an advertising agency, and a publishing house. I've got loads of ideas, and I want your help. This is still under wraps, so let's keep it between us for now." Caroline was taken aback. "Does Hannah know about this?" Andrew shook his head. "No, she doesn't." "But you're getting married. Shouldn't she be involved?" Caroline couldn't hide her curiosity. "Hannah's not really into this kind of thing. She doesn't get the whole work and effort part," Andrew explained briefly. They spent more time at the office, with Andrew pointing out his plans for each part of the space. Later, Andrew suggested grabbing lunch, and they found a cozy cafe nearby. Lunch was filled with work talk, but the atmosphere was light and comfortable. Out of the blue, Andrew remarked, "It's weird. We've only just met, but it feels like I've known you forever." He took Caroline's hand in his, looking earnestly into her eyes. "It's like you were meant to come into my life and brighten it up." They returned home just in time for dinner, and Hannah, who had been watching from the window, was visibly upset. She could sense the shift in Andrew's behavior. He seemed more distant, a stark contrast to the closeness they once shared. As Andrew and Caroline stepped inside, Hannah quickly approached, clinging to Andrew with exaggerated affection. "Darling, I've missed you so much. I waited to have dinner with you. Let's eat together, shall we? Caroline, you'll join us, right?" she offered, her tone overly sweet. Caroline hesitated. "I was thinking of just getting something from the kitchen." Andrew wouldn't have it. "No, please join us for dinner." Caroline, finding it hard to say no to Andrew, agreed. She changed into her comfortable pajamas and joined everyone at the dining table, where Hannah barely concealed a snicker at Caroline's attire. The staff had prepared the table meticulously. During dinner, Andrew praised the pancakes they had for breakfast, assuming Nadezhda, the cook, had made them. When Nadezhda revealed she hadn't, and that they were already on the table when she arrived, Andrew was curious. Seeing Nadezhda's glance towards Caroline, Andrew realized who the cook might have been. "Was it you, Caroline?" he asked, pleasantly surprised. "You're quite the cook, then." Caroline modestly downplayed her contribution. "It's nothing special, really. I just enjoy the homely feel that comes from baking." Hannah, unable to resist a jab, criticized the pancakes. "They were too oily and probably packed with calories. Maybe you should ease up on the baking, Caroline, unless you're aiming to gain weight," she said with a sharp edge to her voice. The dinner table was quiet, except for the occasional conversation between Andrew and Hannah, with Caroline mostly keeping to herself. The atmosphere shifted when Hannah directed a snide remark towards Caroline, questioning how she had gained Andrew's high regard. Caroline, caught off guard, chose not to engage. "Look, Hannah, I'm really not here to compete with anyone. I'd just like to finish my meal," she said, her voice calm but firm, before excusing herself from the table. Andrew, frustrated by Hannah's unnecessary provocation, confronted her. "Why do you have to be so harsh with her?" he asked. Hannah's response was dismissive. "I was just asking a question, but really, why bring someone so out of place here?" Andrew's patience wore thin. "You do remember I'm from a similar background, right? Or would you like to mock that as well? Caroline is more than qualified, both in terms of education and experience. And what about you?" His tone was sharp, a rarity for him. Hannah's parting words were bitter. "So, is she here to take my place? I see why you invited her. You might just regret this," she said, leaving Andrew to ponder alone. That night, Andrew couldn't find peace. He stayed up in the living room, his thoughts swirling around Caroline. She brought a sense of comfort and authenticity to his life that he hadn't realized was missing. He felt a genuine connection with her, free from the fear of judgment or misunderstanding. Their time together grew, further solidifying Andrew's feeling that Caroline was more than just a temporary part of his life. This realization first dawned on him during their time in the hospital. Soon, a call from his father promised another challenging day. Lately, conversations with his father were fraught with criticism, driving Andrew towards his decision to start anew, independently. This ambition was something only Caroline knew about, a testament to the trust he placed in her. Caroline had become a significant presence in Andrew's life, her simplicity, authenticity, and dedication shining brightly. Her involvement in his new venture was total, her ideas and enthusiasm breathing life into the project. Andrew walked into his father James's well-appointed office, bracing himself for the conversation ahead. "What's so important?" he asked. James wasted no time, diving straight in. "Hannah reached out to me, quite upset," he began, casting a probing look at Andrew. Andrew couldn't help but smirk at the revelation. "So, you're stepping in as the mediator and matchmaker now, huh?" James responded with a mix of concern and frustration. "I'm not meddling for the sake of it. If you're making a mistake, who better than your father to point it out?" Andrew's patience thinned. "Don't you think I'm past the age of needing parenting? I'm not that little kid anymore, the one you weren't there for when it mattered most. I can manage my own relationships," he retorted. James tried to steer the conversation back to safer waters. "Listen, Hannah adores you. She's a great match. And who's this person you've brought home? Some drifter?" At this, Andrew stood his ground firmly. "Caroline is anything but a drifter. She's intelligent, respectable, and frankly, she's better than all this. Who I invite into my home is my choice," he declared, making his way to the door. Pausing, he added, "Let's hope this talk was somewhat enlightening," before exiting. Feeling a mix of anger and defiance, Andrew sought solitude, though not complete isolation. He drove to the site of his new venture, where Caroline was already hard at work. Watching her engrossed in her tasks, he felt an unexpected sense of peace. It was in her company that he found genuine comfort, especially in recent times. He prepared 2 cups of coffee and knocked on the office door. Caroline greeted him with a cheerful, "Come in, boss." Andrew entered with a light-hearted comment. "Seems like you've taken charge here. Maybe I should start taking orders from you," he said, sharing a laugh with Caroline. After finishing their coffee, Andrew and Caroline got down to business. Caroline excitedly shared that she had secured some top-notch specialists, some of whom were her former colleagues. She also mentioned setting up a meeting with a company that produces the essential equipment they needed. "I've been working on some ideas for the office layout too. I've sketched some drafts for you to check out," Caroline said, passing a folder to Andrew. In that moment, Andrew felt a strong urge to be closer to her, taking her hands in his eyes lingering on her lips. He fought the impulse to kiss her, worried about how she might react. Just then, his phone rang, interrupting the moment. Caroline could tell from Andrew's tone and pale complexion that something was wrong. "It's my mum. The hospital called. We need to go there now," Andrew explained, urgency in his voice. "I'm here for you, whatever you need," Caroline offered, but Andrew's next words cut her off. "Would you come with me? I need you there," he said, reaching for her hand. Without hesitation, Caroline agreed, quickly grabbing her coat to follow him. They reached the hospital late, where they were informed that Andrew's mother had suffered a heart attack but was now stable. The doctor suggested they return in the morning. Deciding not to head back to the city, Andrew asked if Caroline would mind staying at his mother's house. She agreed, finding comfort in Andrew's constant presence. Caroline found herself in a whirl of emotions. Not long ago, she felt she had nothing left. But now, thoughts of Andrew consumed her. Despite knowing about his girlfriend, she couldn't deny the intense attraction she felt towards him. Everything about him drew her in: his voice, his scent, his smile, and his eyes. This was a stark contrast to her feelings for Cole. She had liked Cole, of course, but never felt such a profound connection, not even in the early days of their relationship. Before Cole, Caroline hadn't been in any serious relationship, so she had little to compare these feelings to, making her current emotions for Andrew all the more confusing and overwhelming. The cozy house exuded warmth and tidiness, something Caroline noticed the moment she stepped in. Andrew slipped into something more comfortable, a basic t-shirt and shorts that accentuated his physique. Caroline found herself secretly admiring him, her heart racing at the sight. The house was adorned with numerous photos of Andrew from various times in his life, adding a personal touch as she got settled. Feeling the need to freshen up, Caroline timidly asked, "Do you mind if I take a shower?" Realizing she hadn't brought a change of clothes, she felt a blush creeping up her cheeks. Andrew, after a brief pause, suggested, "I'm not sure anything of my mum's would fit you," with a light-hearted smile. "How about one of my t-shirts? It'll probably be more like a dress on you, given how petite you are." The thought of spending the night there, just the two of them, made Caroline's nerves tingle as she showered. "Why am I so worked up? I'm already living at his place, although it's not just the two of us there. But here, it's different," she mused, her thoughts swirling. Emerging at the kitchen doorway post-shower, Caroline caught Andrew off guard, his gaze lingering on her. "You actually pull off my clothes pretty well," he remarked, a hint of surprise in his voice. Trying to lighten the mood, Caroline commented on the appealing aroma. "It smells wonderful." Andrew, with a warm smile, responded, "We've got limited options, but I hope you'll enjoy it." Dinner turned out to be surprisingly delightful. The initial tension gradually dissolved as they ate, with Andrew sharing stories from his youth and the complex dynamics with his father. Caroline listened intently, sensing Andrew was revealing a more personal side to her. Post-dinner, they flipped through photo albums, with Andrew providing context to each snapshot. Caroline, reflecting on the images, remarked, "You're fortunate to have had such a great childhood and a caring mother. Treasure her. Family and loved ones are irreplaceable. I'd do anything to have my family close by again." Her thoughts briefly lingered on her parents, a tinge of sadness in her voice. Andrew gently brushed away a tear from Caroline's cheek, her vulnerability touching him deeply. He wanted to embrace her, to shield her from any sorrow. Yet, in a swift move, he leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that mingled tenderness with restrained passion. Caroline responded eagerly, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Andrew then lifted her in his arms, carrying her to his bedroom as their kisses continued. His voice laced with emotion. "Are you sure about this? Just say the word and I'll stop," Andrew whispered, concern evident in his tone. Caroline, lost in the moment, simply pulled him closer, her actions speaking louder than words. That night was theirs alone, a deep connection that went beyond the physical, as if their very souls were entwined. The next morning, Andrew watched Caroline sleeping peacefully on his shoulder, her beauty even more striking in the quiet of dawn. He had spent much of the night awake, contemplating his feelings. The closeness they had shared made the thought of continuing his lackluster relationship with Hannah seem pointless. It was clear to him now, he was completely taken by Caroline and couldn't bear the thought of being apart from her. The buzz of his phone broke the silence. Careful not to disturb Caroline, Andrew slipped out to the kitchen, quietly closing the door. But Caroline, now awake, lay still, the memories of their night together bringing a smile to her face. Just as she was about to get up, she overheard fragments of Andrew's phone conversation that stopped her cold. "Hannah, please understand, my mum's in the hospital. I'll be there as soon as I can, once I know she's all right." Andrew's voice carried a mix of frustration and concern. The call ended, and Caroline was left feeling a wave of disappointment wash over her. The realization hit her hard. She might just be a brief escape for Andrew, a man on the verge of marriage. The morning unfolded with a flurry of activity. After sharing a quick breakfast, Andrew and Caroline made their way to the hospital. Andrew consulted with the doctor overseeing his mother's care before they visited her room. Despite her frailty, his mother's face lit up at the sight of her son. When Caroline stepped aside to give them a moment, Andrew's mother couldn't help but comment, "You look so happy, my dear. It's clear you found someone special," her words warm and sincere. Andrew simply smiled and held her hand, his heart full. 2 days later, with his mother safely back at home and under the care of a visiting nurse, Andrew and Caroline returned to the city. They were barely through the door when Hannah, Andrew's fiancée, rushed to embrace him, proclaiming her relief and love. Her eyes then turned cold as they landed on Caroline, and after a brief, unsettling kiss with Andrew, Caroline retreated to her room, feeling out of place. It wasn't long before Hannah confronted her. "Thinking of taking my place? It's futile. You know why? Because I'm carrying his child," Hannah declared, her words sharp and final. "Everything was perfect before you arrived. It's clear you don't belong here. I trust you'll do what's right," she added, leaving Caroline in shock. Merely 2 hours later, Caroline was packed and ready to leave. As she waited for her taxi, a familiar touch stopped her. "Caroline," Andrew's voice was laced with regret and longing. "Please, Andrew, don't. I need to leave. Hannah's right. I'm the outsider here. And with a baby involved, I can't stay. It's best for everyone." Caroline's voice broke, her resolve clear. "I wish things were different. I didn't know about the baby, but it's you I want." Andrew's eyes searched hers, desperate for a sign of hope. "I'm sorry, Andrew. My taxi's here. I'll keep working on the project, but it's best we keep our distance. It'll be easier on us both," Caroline said, her voice steady as she walked away. Andrew stood frozen, watching her taxi disappear, taking with it his chance at happiness. He knew he could leave Hannah, provide for her and the child, but Caroline's principles wouldn't allow it. She stood by her values, even if it meant walking away from what they had. Caroline got in touch with the family renting her trailer and informed them she'd be moving back in. They could stay, she said, sharing the space with her. The Guatemalan family, overjoyed by her return, welcomed her with a heartfelt dinner. Grateful for her generosity, they packed up after the meal, bid her well, and moved on. Thrown back into the thick of work, Caroline kept herself buried in tasks from dawn till dusk, streamlining operations and tackling challenges head-on. Her goal was simple: keep busy and keep her mind off other things. Andrew, on the other hand, was haunted by thoughts of Caroline. Through bits and pieces picked up from colleagues, he kept tabs on her life, learning how much she was respected and appreciated at work. Life at home grew increasingly difficult. Hannah's presence became more and more intolerable, with only the impending arrival of their child anchoring him. Their wedding loomed on the horizon, a thought he pushed to the back of his mind, preferring instead to lose himself in dreams where Caroline and he found happiness together. Back in her trailer, Carolina was making it feel like home again. While unpacking, she stumbled upon a new pair of house slippers, a purchase meant as a surprise for Cole that brought back a rush of memories. She remembered leaving a pair at Cole's, and suddenly her heart raced. The same slippers had been on Hannah's feet the day Caroline left Andrew's house. The connection seemed impossible. Why would Hannah stray from Andrew, who offered her everything, to be with Cole? The question nagged at her all day, leading her to sift through past events for any hint of an answer. That evening, driven by a mix of determination and dread, Caroline made her way to her old office, a decision that risked severing ties with Andrew for good. Greeted by Uncle Mike, the security guard, at the entrance, she found an unlikely ally. "What's got you here at this hour, Caroline? The place is empty," he remarked. "I need to get into one of the offices, Uncle Mike. It's crucial, and I'm counting on your trust," she implored. Uncle Mike, a figure from a bygone era, wasn't easily convinced, but his fondness for Caroline swayed him. He let her in with a stern warning. His job was on the line if word got out. Caroline gave Uncle Mike a grateful hug, promising to be as discreet as possible. She then dove into the documents, focusing on the company's financial records. Though the contracts were complex and mostly beyond her, the expense accounts were more straightforward. Sifting through the invoices, Caroline noticed something unusual. Most of the costs associated with cleaning up after the explosion of Andrew's car were billed to Josh, Andrew's close friend. This struck Caroline as odd because handling such logistics seemed out of character for someone like Josh, especially tasks as specific as cleaning Andrew's driveway. Suddenly, the sound of the main office door opening made her heart jump. She quickly turned off her flashlight and ducked under a desk, her concern for Uncle Mike's job overshadowing her fear of getting caught. Peeking out, she saw 2 pairs of feet and overheard a heated conversation. "You're messing everything up. If you hadn't botched things, my plan would have worked flawlessly. Who thinks blowing up a car is a subtle move?" Josh's voice was filled with frustration. Cole's defense was weak. "What choice did I have? You wanted him out of the picture without raising suspicions." Josh retorted, "And you thought a car explosion was subtle? Really?" The room fell silent for a moment before Cole spoke up again, his voice tinged with desperation. "I need to be careful now. He's tightened security and is watching everything closely. Plus, I need money. Hannah's threatening to leave me, and she's pregnant." Looking up, Cole's expression hardened as he locked eyes with Josh. "Relax. Once you finish the job, I'll sort out the paperwork, and the company will be yours. Just don't mess it up again. And keep me in the loop," Josh tried to reassure him. Caroline's heart raced as she processed the gravity of the conversation she'd just overheard. Josh exited the office, leaving Cole sitting in a contemplative silence at the table's edge. Caroline, who had been hiding beneath the table, held her breath, waiting for him to leave. Finally, Cole stood, switched off the light, and departed, leaving Caroline to quietly emerge from her hiding spot. She slipped out to where Uncle Mike was waiting, his worry palpable. Caroline hugged him tightly, whispering her thanks and assuring him, "It's going to be okay, Uncle Mike," before she hurried off. Later that night, Caroline made her way to Andrew's, presenting him with the audio she'd captured on her phone. When Andrew questioned how she found herself at the office that late, Caroline traced the story back to a pair of house slippers. After hearing her out, Andrew, with a mixture of disbelief and humour, remarked, "I guess I'm like a cat with 9 lives, huh?" sharing a laugh with Caroline before pulling her into a reassuring hug. "You've come to my rescue again. I'm starting to think I can't afford to be without you," he said, his words punctuated by a tender kiss. "I always knew our story wasn't over." The following morning, Andrew made an early start, reaching the office by taxi and summoning Josh, Cole, and Hannah for a 10 a.m. meeting, unbeknownst to them that they'd all been called in together. The police were also discreetly informed and on standby. Josh was the first to arrive, met with Andrew's seemingly warm welcome, and gestured to take a seat. Hannah followed, attempting to greet Andrew with a kiss, which he subtly avoided, indicating she should sit down as well. Cole's entry lastly surprised both Josh and Hannah, their reactions noted by Andrew with a knowing smile. Without a word, Andrew played Caroline's recording on the television. As the damning evidence unfolded, the room was heavy with tension. Once the recording ended, Andrew, still seated, turned to Josh with a look of profound disappointment and said, "I really thought of you as a friend, almost like a brother. It's such a pity." When the police came in, they arrested Josh and Cole on the spot, leaving Hannah stunned and confused by the rapid turn of events. It turned out that Josh had initially recruited Cole, who, during his tenure, became romantically involved with Andrew's wife, Hannah. Despite her deep feelings for Cole, Hannah was aware of his financial shortcomings and chose to stay with Andrew for his wealth. Josh and Cole shared a mutual goal: to get rid of Andrew and lay claim to his fortune. That same night, Andrew made the tough decision to send Hannah away. The next day, his father James called, threatening to take over the business unless Andrew reconsidered his actions. "Fed up," Andrew retorted. "Go ahead, take the company. I'm done letting you control me. I'm walking away from all this tomorrow." After hanging up, Andrew grabbed his keys and headed straight to Caroline's. Upon seeing her, Andrew asked, "How about we go on an adventure together?" Caroline, with a knowing smile, accepted. They drove off to a secluded spot, spending days filled with warmth and joy, a stark contrast to their recent turmoil. Heeding Caroline's suggestion, they visited Andrew's mother, Olivia, to foster a closer relationship. Olivia seemed to have anticipated their arrival, welcoming them warmly. The visit was filled with warmth and laughter, with Caroline cooking pancakes and sharing stories with her soon-to-be mother-in-law. Meanwhile, Andrew resolved his business matters, relinquishing control to his father, James. This decision, once feared, now felt liberating, as Andrew realized he had everything he needed for a fulfilling life. After a rejuvenating stay with Olivia, Andrew and Caroline returned to the city, determined to start anew. Within 6 months, their hard work paid off as they successfully attracted investors and propelled their startup to new heights. Meanwhile, Cole and Josh faced the consequences of their actions in prison. Hannah, left to fend for herself and expecting a child, received no support from her father. She resorted to taking on various jobs to sustain herself and her unborn child. One day, a surprising visitor showed up at Hannah's modest one-bedroom apartment, Caroline. She was there to check on Hannah, who was nearing the end of her pregnancy, and offered her support during this critical time. Hannah was moved to tears by Caroline's gesture, embracing her and apologizing